Hello, everyone. Thank you very much for being here today. The last session of Ignite, the last session of the day. We understand that we are between you and lunch, so hang in there a little bit more. We have some really cool stuff to talk about. My name is Yuri Diorgis. I've been at Microsoft for the past 19 years, and I've been working with Defender for Cloud back in the day since it was called Azure Security Center. Anyone here work with Azure Security Center in the past? Oh, that's awesome. Who been working with Azure Security Center since 2015 when we released? Wow, that's amazing. Thank you very much for your loyalty. And my team is responsible for work with customers to deploy Defender for Cloud. And we are really glad to be here. I have my friend Pritan here.
Hello, everybody. I'm Pritam. I'm one of the product managers with Defender for Cloud, focused on API and AI security, directly targeting your business applications. Extremely proud to be here with Yuri and putting out all the new features, the hard work that our teams have put through the last several months. Thank you.
All right, so let's get started here. This is the last day of Ignite. You probably heard some of these stories, and you've probably seen some of these numbers before, but it's super important to call out and to re-emphasize some of these numbers, mainly the first one from left to right about the lack of visibility in repositories. We work really closely with SAMS to create a multi-cloud report, and during this research, we found out that 65% of repositories contain source code vulnerabilities. And talking to customers, which is something that my team does a lot, we've seen that this is also a trend and a concern from the decision makers. Is pushing vulnerable code to the cloud, pushing vulnerable containers, image to the cloud as well. So we need to go not only shift left, but be working closely with developers to ensure that they have the right tools, and these tools are giving the right insights for the secure operations to rationalize what needs to be remediated. The other point is, and this is a very interesting story, I remember talking to a customer, and they were 100% certainty that they didn't have any exposure. We don't have any exposure, we can do this POC with Defender for Cloud, but I'm pretty sure that it's all okay, we don't have any workload that exposed. As soon as we spun up Defender CSPM and we started looking at the potential attack paths, we identify a lot of points of entry. And this is what it is. What happened is a lot of companies, they have so many resources because they are also moving to a multi-cloud approach. That's what the last number is saying. 98% of the organizations are utilizing multi-cloud. So sometimes they don't know what they don't know. But there are people that are provisioning new resources, and these resources are exposed. So now you have workloads in Azure, AWS, GCP, and your footprint is way larger. There's a lot of exposure, and you don't know that is happening. Because many times you are working in silos with different tools, and there is no consolidation of data insights about your footprint across different clouds. What we've seen over and over as well is that threat actors, they go to low-hanging fruit. They want to have a better return of investment. And we've been doing over the years a really good job with endpoints, email, and identity. We need to continue enforcing security controls throughout those workloads. It's super important to continue to invest on that. But the reality is that threat actors, they understand that with multi-cloud, the likelihood of compromise of different workloads is really high because it's hard to maintain an environment without centralization of information, without proper insights across different cloud providers. So they go to VMs, they go after storage accounts, they go after Kubernetes, directly from the cloud. They don't need to go to the endpoint to have the first entry. They can go to a workload and move laterally to other workloads. So we need to not only protect our endpoints, but also our cloud workloads. And the reality even gets bigger. We've seen this whole week, it was really, the theme of the moment was AI. And it's super important that we use AI to empower our defense. It's super important also that we empower our developers to create Gen AI apps. But if they don't do that in a secure manner, they are going to open up for a lot of threats. And these threats, they have different ways to get in. If you look to the left on the AI usage layer, The attack footprint can be via video, speech, image, text. It can be multiple artifacts. For example, I've seen a lot of banks that are utilizing Gen AI apps to empower customers to talk with a Gen AI chatbot about their account. What if you don't have the right secure controls in place and you start to ask questions that can disclose your sensitive information through that chatbot? You don't want that. You want to have the right secure control in place to avoid direct prompt injection, to avoid sensitive data leakage. So you need to worry about this, and you need to work closely with developers to ensure that they know about this. The other thing about Gen AI apps is that there are different layers of compromise. When we look at the application layer, your Gen AI apps most likely will ingest data from somewhere. So you need to be also concerned about potential data poisoning. Threat actors will act on that layer, and you need to have the right secure controls, not only to improve the secure hygiene of those Gen AI apps, but also threat detection. We always work on both sides, on the proactive approach and reactive approach as well. The growth of plugins is also another area that you need to be very aware about. There is plugins for ChatGPT and things like that that can also be compromised with data poisoning or jailbreak. And last but not least is the AI platform itself. So when your developers and when your organization start to invest in create Gen AI apps, they will need to probably train their model. And if your model is compromised at that point, now you have compromised data as part of the model. Think about the news agents that is trying to create a Gen AI apps, and now they are ingesting data that is not accurate. Now they have inaccurate data that they will use to answer things. So that's not a good scenario. So you have to have protection in all these layers. And our vision in Defender for Cloud is to have the complete Synapse strategy that includes AI as part of the portfolio from the moment that you spin up new resources on the left, push code to the cloud, with our CSPM strategy, also part of our Synapse, integrated with our Kin solution, that we are continuously monitoring and give to you risk factor recommendations. Because the reality is, the traditional CSPM is very static. You have benchmarks, and people say, oh, I use NIST, I use CIS, which is good, but it's still static. What is important to your environment? How can you prioritize when you have 100 recommendations that you are following the CIS, and 100 are high severity? How can you know which one is really higher than the others if everything is high? What happens when everything is high? Nothing is high, because you can't take care of everything, right? So you need another layer on top of that that provides you the insights that you need to contextualize which ones are important to you. That's what you need. So this is what we bring with the Synapse. And then when we move to the right side, it's runtime. We need to also have threat detections that are tailored to each specific workload. Think about it. When you are, for example, moving from on-premise to the cloud, you may have some secure controls on-premise like NIDS, IDS, which are great for on-premise, but they are not tailored to the attack surface of a cloud resource. So Kubernetes has a completely different attack surface than a storage account, than a VM. So our research team, they work to create analytics that are specific to each workload, okay? And this is the power of having a Synapse strategy fully integrated with your CSPM, because it's a continuous improvement process, right? You learn from the incidents, you react faster, and you are able to feed all that information back to your posture management so that you can improve your secure posture, because it's an ongoing investment. So a lot of customers, they come to us and say, so which plan should I enable first? Because I start with the free tier, the foundational is okay, I have the secure score, but now I want to go to the next level and really start taking advantage of Synapse. Well, the first one that you should think about is definitely Defender CSPM, because Defender CSPM will give you all the insights that you need. It will give you the attack path, the risk prioritization, okay? And it will allow you to have an agentless approach to discover data sensitivity. We all love Purview, which is great, but if you don't have Purview, you still be able to identify sensitive data just by having Defender CSPM because it's part of the plan. So we do a smart scanning across storage accounts, database, and we are able to do this classification so that you can prioritize what is really important to your environment. And we also have DevOps capabilities that are baked in to the plan, such as infrastructure as code. So all these things are part of the plan. And I recommend you to go to aka.ms/MS-CNAPP, which is our ebook. It's a free ebook that you can download that has all the planning strategy for CNAPP adoption, including the maturity model that we have, so that you understand the journey between getting into the CNAPP from the get-go. aka.ms/MS-CNAPP is our free ebook. And today at Ignite, not today, this week at Ignite, of course, we release a lot of innovations. One of the innovations that we release is the capability to scan containers images from their creation in the CI/CD pipeline. This is outstanding. We've been hearing a lot of customers asking about this feature. Hey, I need to be able to scan containers when I'm creating the image. I need to be able to block vulnerable images to be pushed to registry. And talking about registry, we are supporting also third-party registries that are not only the traditional ones in Azure, AWS, and GCPs. Docker Hub, JFrog, we are supporting that now. The other thing that we are releasing is the API posture management, which I will not steal Pritan's thunder. That's his part. He's going to dive into this more deeply. And the other thing is the AI secure posture management going into GA. This is huge. This is super important because, as I said when I was talking about that diagram, the AI diagram, you need to understand what you have to protect when it comes to AI. And with the AI posture management, we give those insights so that you can work with the developers to better handle the applications. With that, let me go real quick here for a demo about our CSPM strategy. So I want to start real quick talking about the visualization when it comes to risk-based factors. In the past, as I said, all recommendations very static, using a benchmark, but now we take in consideration those risk factors that you see here. So when you look at this, what you have is a capability to understand that this is the most important recommendation to remediate because there are different risk factors, and there is also this value here, which means that when you resolve this recommendation, you're going to be disrupting 27 attack paths. So it really pays off to just take care of this recommendation. Which one is the most important one? This one, because you are disrupting potential 27 attack paths, okay? So when you go into this recommendation, you are able to see information, very detailed information about the resources, the different risk factors, the MITRE attack mapping as well, that is super important to us. The risk factors are listed here. And then you go to the findings, because this is a vulnerability that needs to be resolved. You also have all the information that needs to be taken care of. And you can explore this by click on each one and then going through the CVEs that needs to be resolved. So that's the risk-based approach when it comes to recommendations. Now, the other thing that is happening lately is that customers, they are starting to utilize the attack path as a KPI to improve their secure posture. So this is a demo environment, so this is not the way you want to be, right? This is a lot of attack paths. So companies, they want to drive this down. They want to be zero, okay? They want to be zero. And they also want to measure mean time to resolve. So how long it takes for your organization to resolve one attack path as soon as it appears. That's another KPI that you can utilize and to continue to improve. On the attack path, we have basically a good story. So if I open this one here, the attack path tells all the details about what's going on, so the attack story. Of course, remember, this is a proactive approach. This is not an attack that has took place. It can take place if you do not do anything, right? So it tells the potential story. And it tells me, and it shows me here all the elements and the entities that are involved on this attack path. First of all, it tells me the IP address here, and look how cool is that. This information, this insight, come from Defender ESM, External Attack Surface Management. And this is, I don't even have license for Defender ESM. It's part, this discoverability is part of Defender CSPM that integrates with ESM to find out your external IP address that exposed. So I get this information part of the Defender CSPM. And then when I see here is that this machine is the one that has more information about it, because if you look closely, we have those three icons. We have the recommendations, we have the insights, and we have the shield, which represents alerts. So when I click on this, I have information regarding why this machine is so vulnerable. It tells me all the CVEs that are open for this machine. Which recommendations should I prioritize for this? And our CNAPP connects proactive information from the CSPM with our CWP. So look how cool is that. Here I can see that in the shield, it shows me there are 4 active alerts. What it means is that this machine right now is probably under attack, or it was recently attacked, because this is an alert, which means the machine has gone through something that is suspicious or malicious. When I click on the alert itself, it pivots to the resource health that shows me the alerts. And these are alerts against the machine. So this truly helps the team to not only identify what is important, but also to understand potential areas of compromise on my environment. This machine is under attack, I need to take an action immediately, all right? So this is the attack path. Excellent. So let's move on here to Coach Runtime. This is a very interesting story because this week at Ignite, we released a lot of capabilities when it comes to containers. And this attack path that you see here, the bottom part of this slide are things that we released this week. Feel free to take a picture because it's really cool. What we have here, an interesting story, if you think about. This scenario, you have an exposed Kubernetes service that leads to a pod, that then leads to a container. And this container, if you look down below, it was provisioned based on images that were pushed from GitHub to the Azure Container Registry, and they were already vulnerable. So there are 2 problems on this diagram. One problem is the pod is exposed to the internet. That's problem number 1. Problem number 2 is I already push the image with vulnerabilities to production. So there are 2 big failures there. One failure when I push, and the other one in maintenance because my pod was exposed. So now, threat actor can compromise this container and then move laterally because it has a managed identity with privilege on Amazon RDS. So this is a true scenario that it can happen if you don't have proper cybersecurity hygiene. Super important to keep a mind on that. So these are some of the capabilities that we are releasing, a summarized version, the container image vulnerability scanning for CI/CD pipeline, the deployment using different registries, Docker Hub, and also JFrog, and runtime capabilities for Azure Kubernetes. But let me go through a demo real quick here, because that will be easier to comprehend. So let me just move back here. All right. So if you work with Defender for Cloud, you understand that under integrations, we have the capability to, for example, connect with ServiceNow. But now we also have this, DevOps ingestion. And this is the really cool stuff, because in the past, we were only able to connect with GitHub, GitLab, and Azure ADO. Now you can ingest from any pipeline. That's the cool thing, right? And with that, we will be able to add new integration, okay? Information about the application name, which will create the principal information. We have also the secret, the client secret, and you can also define an expiration date for this secret here as well. Next, we're going to click on Next, and we'll create an Enter ID application. Right there, creating the application. And as soon as it finishes creating the application, it will generate some information which will be critical for us to use on the CLI command. We're going to have the API token, the API client ID, and the tenant ID. This information is going to be utilized by the CLI tool that we're going to see here. You see that some variables were created, right? And we are hiding this for obvious reasons. And this information is available, in this case, at a Bitbucket. So those variables were created based on that information that we create on the Defender Cloud portal. And next, we're going to go to the code. And here is just a sample where we are adding this MSDO 3V test. And we're going to call the Microsoft Guardian CLI. So this is the new capability that you're going to be able to test next week. Not this week. Next week, it will be ready for you. But you heard here first. So with that, it's very important to also mention that by default, it will break the build if it finds vulnerabilities. But you have the capability to say, hey, look, I don't want to break the build. So you can also change to not break upon detections of vulnerabilities. So let's then look for both scenarios, right? The scenario where it breaks and the scenario where it doesn't break. The default scenario, as I said, it breaks. So let me switch. We're going to switch here for this scenario that it breaks. Notice that I'm building a Docker image and running the MSDO 3V test, that script that was created. And then on the right side is going to have the result, showing all the informations that will be available for you. Notice that it will show the vulnerabilities and everything. And down towards the end of this file, you're going to see the information that why it didn't build. It is basically because there are vulnerabilities. So the default is to break the build with this exception error that you see here, telling exactly why it broke. Okay, so that's the idea behind. Now, there is also the scenario where you just want to validate, or this is a test environment or developer environment, and you just want to build this image, and you want to let it go, even if there are vulnerabilities. That's fine, but we still log all the vulnerabilities as the output. So you're going to see here on the output that the vulnerabilities are still there. You're going to still see the outputs showing the severity and everything. Now, how this information can be accessible in Defender for Cloud? Well, via Cloud Security Explorer. You can do some queries to understand all the pipelines that you have, and then select a different condition. For example, push to a container image, and after that, you're going to search. So now you have all that information also available in Defender for Cloud for your security administrator to look at it. You see here that there is a Jenkins pipeline that you can obtain more information about the push file URL and the push run. All that information is available. And you can continue to narrow the search for different conditions. So let's add a different condition here related to the application being run by, let's see, for a container. And then when we run this, we are narrowing the search. The whole idea is to empower you to continue to dig to what is really relevant to you, because this is a typical case that you are trying to find out who pushed a vulnerable image. And you can do that with a couple of clicks using Cloud Security Explorer, and you're going to have all this information available. Now, you can go one step further to say, okay, besides this whole thing, I also want to see if the image that was pushed was also vulnerable. So I'm going to add another condition with an and. In other words, both conditions needs to be true in order for results to take place. And boom, we have the result here showing that there is only one image, in this case, that was pushed from Jenkins pipeline. So that's the power of bridging the gap between pushing the code from the CI/CD pipeline to the cloud, empowering the teams to have that information in their platform that they use, and also empower the security operations teams to use Cloud Security Explorer, which is part of Defender CSPM for that. The other innovation that we are bringing here is, if you know the recommendations in Defender for Cloud, we added now the connectors for Docker Hub and JFrog. So now you're going to be able to have this very similar experience that you had in the past, right? Where you were able to identify the containers registers with vulnerabilities and then research more about which vulnerabilities are those. So the experience is exactly the same. If you've been working with Defender for Cloud, you know this dashboard. The only difference is that we are looking at third-party registers, in this case, Docker Hub, where you have these details about the image information in the repository, and of course, all the findings that were in this image. Upon click on each one of those finds, you're going to see details about the CVE. And there is one item here that is super important that we also added, which is the exploitability. Was this vulnerability ever exploited? Is any information about exploitability in the wild that we need to have? So this is a little bit down below. I'm going to expand that. You see here there is no exploitability in this case. But this information is also something that we added to empower more. From here, you can also pivot to the Kubernetes itself, which we enrich our Kubernetes capability to give you more information. So let's switch now to the Kubernetes visualization, where you can see not only the vulnerabilities, but also the misconfigurations. So this visualization is part of the Kubernetes dashboard that has a plugin for Defender for Cloud. This is a new experience that allows you to select the cluster that is affected and take actions. Because one of the challenges in a multi-cloud is really to assign ownership to someone to remediate. If you are not the resource owner, how can I assign this to someone else? So now you can also click on this, assign an ownership for this recommendation, and say, look, you need to remediate this. I'm going to send an email to you. I'm going to assign this task to you. It's about empowering the workload owner to remediate. And after that, you will be able to, they will receive an email. And this feature is also integrated with ServiceNow, which is also amazing. With that, I'm going to pass to my friend, Pritam, to talk about API security.
Great. Thank you, Yuri. What an awesome set of capabilities we just saw Yuri present. Let's switch gears a little bit and go towards how applications and APIs are playing an important role in our cybersecurity world today. Defender for APIs has been a GA product since about a year as part of our CWP plan. And here we provide both posture and threat protection capabilities. But with this launch, I'm super happy to announce that API posture management capabilities are directly available within the Defender CSPM plan that allows you to assess all of your API risks, vulnerabilities that say, is my APIs unauthenticated? Do they carry any sensitive data? And if my APIs have never been used but left behind in production, and what are the risks that it is, what are the risks that are rising from it, right? So let's take a look at a real-world use case similar to what Yuri mentioned. So in this case, you see an API that has some misconfigurations directly exposed to the internet. But the fact that in the backend, your APIs are connecting to a vulnerable virtual machine that eventually has access to your AI deployments. And those AI deployments can talk to your underlying data sets, which are used for your model training or even fine-tuning your data models. Now, what happens in this case is APIs become an entry point to your cloud application. They're also becoming a front door to threat actors directly entering your cloud applications and causing lateral movement risks or including data exfiltration risks. So Defender for Cloud security posture management today provides you the capabilities to assess both direct risks by addressing the vulnerabilities that you see on the compute, on the runtime connecting to your AI applications, but also an indirect risk that is happening or arising here through APIs. So with this launch, We brought native integration capabilities for API security posture directly within Defender CSPM with all the posture-related capabilities. We also added new functionalities which extend one step further on the API data security features. So we assess your sensitive data, not just within your API metadata or your request and response, but we also include directly any data that is exposed within your API URL, query parameters, or even path parameters. Now, this is one of the top OWASP risks that usually needs to be addressed at high priority. Adding to that, we also brought new capabilities where API risks are really not seen in isolation. They need to be seen in context of how it affects the broader business applications. So we brought new capabilities with mapping of APIs directly to your backend compute that is hosting this API or talking to your APIs in the backend, and with giving you the full contextual visibility and exposure risks to APIs and the applications. And finally, we have an integration that is powered by our partners to test your APIs in your CI/CD pipelines directly, both in GitHub and your Azure DevOps, where you can run your API scanning both statically and dynamically and ensure that APIs are protected before they are pushed to production. So this integration gives you a seamless integration even when you don't have GitHub Advanced security licensing available as well. So with that, let's take a quick look at what the capabilities provide. Now, you saw Yuri showed this view of Defender for Cloud. So Defender CSPM is one of the plans that provides you agentless posture capabilities. When you go into settings, you can now see a new extension available that talks about all of your API security posture, which is agentlessly integrated inside of Defender CSPM. And with a click of a button, we discover all of your APIs that are published within your Azure API Management Gateway, bring a unified inventory, and assess all the posture risks that are going. And then to really prioritize this risk, let's take a look into the Cloud Security Explorer, where I can use pre-built queries, or even I can run my own queries to know what are my most risky APIs in this case. So let's take a look at one of the examples that I have here called show me all my APIs which are exposed to the internet, and they, OK. So maybe I can just say, hey, show me all my API endpoints that are exposed directly to the internet, and they contain sensitive data. Now, this gives you a powerful way of showing any APIs out of all the different API operations I have, which are the most important ones I need to fix first. You have an operation here that is directly exposing to the internet, and you also have which property in that API that is carrying this sensitive data, giving you the visibility to go pinpoint and fix it on priority. The same thing can now be extended to your backend applications. So here, I have the API endpoint, which is exposed to the internet, but it is also connecting to a VM or a virtual machine in the backend, which is used for AI, and it has inherent CVE vulnerabilities. Now, you see how you have the full exposure risk of where my API is talking to in the backend. Which virtual machine is it talking to? Who's the owner of that virtual machine? And what is it actually doing with AI? And which AI deployment or AI service it's actually talking to? So this gives a full deep dive into how my APIs are connecting to my backend applications, especially when they are causing the indirect risks to be exposed to threat actors. So with that, let's move on to the next topic, which is the AI posture management. So here, AI posture management was launched in preview a few months ago, but now it's fully generally available for you to use directly as part of your Defender CSPM plan. Again, going back to a real-world example, what I have here is a generative AI app that's similar to what Yuri had shown earlier, exposed to the internet, and they can actually access your underlying data stores that contain sensitive data, or they may be used for grounding, and they can also authenticate to your AI deployment models or data sets that are used for training these generative AI applications. So today, with AI posture management being generally available, we've also introduced some new set of capabilities that can now expand the AI posture management, including your Azure OpenAI services, Azure ML services, but also to your Amazon Bedrock. Now, this is including with all the new recommendations, Security Explorer and Insights, and attack paths. And the second most important, I think this is going to be a game-changing feature, is where we are also introducing new AI grounding insights that can directly tell you which are the AI models used for grounding, how does it address the data poisoning, and also sensitive data exposure risk. So let's take a look at this in action as well. So now, if I go back to my Defender for Cloud, the best place to start is my Cloud Security Explorer. I can use some of the pre-built queries, or simply, I can query, show me all my data resources and my AI services or applications that is actually used for AI grounding data. Now, out of all of your AI deployments, you can specifically see which of your data stores, which of your AI services are the ones used for grounding. Now, this could also include other vulnerabilities like your AI LangChain vulnerabilities, anything that needs to be addressed proactively before it becomes victim in the hands of threat actors. Now, this is where we directly showing which AI resource in this deployment is actually vulnerable and how to fix it. The next thing is attack paths. So you're all familiar with the attack path. Now, let's all put this together. We build attack paths from compute to AI, or even from code to runtime, to show you different ways how threat actors can actually target your generative AI applications. So the first one here just extends the example I showed you before from API to a compute that's connecting to AI. Now here, let's take it a step forward. I have an internet-exposed virtual machine with high severity vulnerabilities that's actually allowing lateral movement to an Azure OpenAI service. You can see the full path of the VM and all the recommendations and insights directly from that compute, which needs to be addressed, including the full contextualization of which AI service it is targeting to. Now, just by fixing one of this VM, like Yuri mentioned, you're able to completely get rid of the attack path that is targeting your AI application. Now, the last example I wanted to show you is also when your deployment models that are directly coming from one of your repositories within your CI/CD pipeline. So here I have an Azure DevOps repository with no branch protection included, which is allowing lateral movement to your OpenAI service. Just by looking at all the graph, how the connectivity is, you can know which repo it belongs to, what is it talking to. It's pushing images to the running compute, and also it can have permissions to the AI, directly pinpointing which AI is getting impacted with it. Now, that's the power of thinking when we look at business application or cloud applications. APIs and AI play a very important role, and securing them proactively and aiding in your risk prioritization is really critical for organizations. With that, I'm going to hand it over back to Yuri to summarize the discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Pritam. That was super important. As I said, it's a new area.
Thank you.
It's a new area that we need to focus on and really empowering our developers to securely develop Gen AI apps. We made some mistakes in the past, right? Developers want to develop mobile applications. Security was not included from the get-go. What happens? We have a wave of mobile applications full of malware and full of breach. So let's make sure that we get this correctly from the beginning and we protect from the entire software development lifecycle. And when you think about software development lifecycle, we have to think about the different areas of compromise when we are pushing code all the way from the source, from your repository, CI/CD pipeline, to the cloud, and to runtime, right? And that's the power of Defender for Cloud, is we are able to look with different lenses at different moments in time, from the time that you are provisioning something, from the posture management to the runtime. So you have to think about the advantage of this platform is that all the solutions are fully integrated. I know that there is a lot of appetite to choose the best in breed, but when you choose the best in breed, you lose integration and insights. What is really the point of having the best vulnerability assessment in the market if that solution is isolated as a silo that doesn't exchange insights with your CSPM? You need to make smart decisions. To make smart decisions, you need all the insights possible so that you can prioritize what is important to you. And we do that across the entire life cycle. So the key takeaways for this presentation, and probably a homework to you, is do a POC, enable Defender CSPM. You have 30 days trial. We have an entire lab that you can try out with a trial subscription. You go to aka.ms/MDC Labs, MDC Labs. Try out, we give you some scripts for you to provision, to test, some examples of things that you can do. This lab is on GitHub, so you can import all the artifacts. It's super cool to utilize, and it has all the scenarios. And if you do a POC for 30 days, there is no charge. So you can basically simulate a lot of scenarios and say, oh, this is actually helps my environment. Some people, they prefer to do a POC in an isolated subscription, which is fine. The problem with an isolated subscription is that you really don't see what's going on, right? So if you enable this in production, then you can see the value because you are seeing all the potential attack paths that your environment has. And for 30 days, you can try out. The other thing is ensure that you start using API, posture management, because API is really a blind spot for many companies. They just start provisioning, they are not aware of the security. A lot of people, they don't even know that there is sensitive data crossing the wire via the transport layer with API, because when they think about sensitive data, they immediately think about storage account, database, but they don't think about sensitive data through API calls. So that's super powerful as well. Make sure that you connect and start utilizing the DevOps capabilities. If you are using Defender CSPM, all the DevOps capabilities that I show here are part of the plan. There's a lot of people that they have Defender CSPM, they have DevOps, but they are not utilizing. Make sure to start to dig into this. And if you are using GenAI apps, ensure that you have the AI posture management capabilities for you to visualize what needs to be improved. So all those 4 things, some additional resources that you can utilize. That is that. I personally am going to do some advertisements of my podcast here, because why not? You can find episodes. We're going to release a lot of episodes post-Ignite at aka.ms/MDC in the field, where I interview a lot of engineers, developers about the new capabilities. Anyone here is a subscriber for the Defender for Cloud in the field? Oh, one. Okay, I'm going to give you a book, okay, just because of that, my new Synapse book. And you can come over here together at the end. And make sure to do the survey. And thank you very much for your time. Have a great return to your home. And thank you for joining us today.
Thank you.